I know I'm going to have a bunch of questions for you, but as far as I can piece it together, your professional path is like anything but straightforward. Uh, we have plenty of time to work with. I'm not sure exactly where you want to call your starting point, but can you take me on like a deep dive of your entrepreneurial journey that brings us up to where we see you right now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the easiest thing to look at is I started my first company when I was about 17 years old. It was a landscaping business, which was like really just me and a few of my buddies that were doing yard work. And there wasn't very much operational packaging in that. It wasn't structured as a corporation. It was just whatever you would consider to be like the smallest level of bootstrap startup to go from there. I got a psychology degree, I got a law degree. After law school, I opened up a chain of CrossFit gyms, and that's actually how I met Pat. Our CrossFit gyms were pretty successful, had a pretty big online presence, got like a YouTube channel that was associated with them that has about 60 million views on it today. And we really did a great job of marketing and execution. And then probably about 4 years into running the business, it seemed like it was time to exit. Sold the CrossFit gyms, moved forward from there, and took about 6 months to a year off to just kind of travel and relax. Then I was doing some consulting work while I was hanging out in LA. I got recruited by a venture capital firm to help turn around an oil and technology company they had invested about 40 million into. And when I was down in Houston, Texas, I moved from LA to Houston, Texas. I was working on that, and I was also working as a consultant, and I was doing consultant for a legal software as a service firm. And my business partner that I was working with as a consultant on the legal startup, I actually ended up becoming business partners with him on the co-working space. So I was incredibly grateful to have the opportunity to turn around the oil and technology company. It was kind of a short thing. I was there for about a year, give or take, and that actually ended up resulting in us achieving our goal a little bit after I left of, unloading or selling the company, which was really good. But one of the harder decisions that I had to make was when I was working for the oil and tech company, I was making a really good salary. And I was like doubling down in consulting on top of that. So I was legitimately making a multiple of what I'd ever made before. And I decided to kind of take a step back from that and move to New York City with just like a pitch deck, which is like 12 sheets of paper. And I got a Airbnb that was like shared in Brooklyn and just took a flyer, like believed in myself, believed in my co-founder. And we were able to raise one of the largest seed rounds of capital in the United States, which was something in the neighborhood of like $5 to $6 million in 2016. Then we took that money. We did an awesome job of building this co-working space. We were named best office interior design in the world. We were top startups of New York City by Inc. magazine. And you could kind of go down a list of accolades, but you could also look at the functional aspects of the business that were really strong. Like within 6 months of opening, we were profitable. We had
Which is almost
really
unheard of.
Right. So it was really strong. Our profit margins were like gold standard in the industry. We were like looking at like low 30s profit margins, which in the co-working shared space is really fantastic. I don't know if you're familiar, but there was a really big co-working company called WeWork. And
I've heard of it.
so WeWork was very similar to the company that I built, except WeWork was a much more valuable company. And I was just halfway through closing a round of capital that put our business somewhere north of $25 million in valuation. I think we were something in the $30+ million valuation. And WeWork collapsed and our round of capital collapsed. So we were going to expand from our first location to our second location. We had a 55,000 square foot location on Park Avenue in Manhattan lined up with one of the largest landowners, and our round of capital fell apart. And that was like kind of tough, but we put the business kind of back together. We were ready to raise another round of capital in the early stages of the year and looking to expand into the city. And then COVID hit, or coronavirus, or whatever you want to say. To give you an idea of the drop in capital that we were doing, we went from doing, $130,000 a month in revenue to, kind of year over year, same month. We went from 130 to like $20,000 a month in revenue. So like an 80% loss in capital year over year. And that's just like a huge fault, right? Like, it's not my co-founder's fault. It's not my fault, but you have to deal with the realities of the situation. And so what we did is, and I give my co-founder a lot of credit, is we took like a very high path. We were respectful to our tenants. We were respectful to our investors. We were honest, and we were direct that when we talked to our investors, that it didn't seem feasible to turn this around in a short time period, because we had this big drop in revenue, and $20,000 was the lowest amount of revenue we had generated, except for the second month we were open. So it was like almost our worst month we'd ever had. And there was just like no end in sight. So
was it because your other tenants were also businesses and couldn't maintain? Was that kind of like, was it just basically the cascading effect of COVID?
Well, yeah, it's just a little bit of a vicious cycle where you have very few people are actually going into offices in New York City at the moment, even today, where there's a big work from home push. If you look at Google, if you look at Twitter, if you look at the big companies, even like the Facebooks of the world, they kind of set the social standard, and then the smaller companies tend to take a page from their book and follow suit. So some of our companies that were working out of our office space just were no longer generating any money, and their businesses were having a hard time. Other businesses just had no use to have a 30-person office space. And just to give you an idea of the size of the business that we built, we could fit about 50 companies in our space, and something in the neighborhood of like 200 to 250 people in the space that we had built in New York City. So it was a reasonable sized co-working space, not the biggest, not the smallest. It was about 20,000 square feet. And it was just like a very challenging cycle. And you reach out to these co-founders or CEOs or people that are operating the business, and just everyone's having a hard time, man. Like, there's no loser winner in this. It's like everyone is struggling at some level. And so when July came around, we talked with our investors, and they said if they would invest if we believed in it to kind of get it through the next 6 months or year, or if we weren't sure, then they were okay with that as well. And we were pretty direct. We just said, look, this is outside of our control. We could wake up in a year and be having like the exact same conversation. And the scary thing is the value of real estate and rent is dropping a lot. So you probably have a 20 or 25% drop in revenue. And so kind of back ending into my original numbers, when we were doing awesome, if we were doing like 30% profit margins, there was like a real chance we could get back on track, refill the space, and be doing like at full capacity, like 10% set. Yeah, I mean, like, and that's just not logical. I mean, there's just not a way to return capital to investors. And you always want to present like I think you always want to put yourself in your investor's shoes. And if you don't really strongly believe that you can execute on a return on capital, then you have to be honest and genuine. And we were, and collectively we all worked together and made a decision to widen the business down.
Yeah, I totally get that. There's just no need to, when you find yourself legitimately in a business situation where the action you're about to take is a big gamble, you're already doing the wrong thing.
Sometimes I think it's not wrong if it's a big gamble, if everyone's on board with it. And let's say there's like a 1 in 10 chance of it working out. But if it works out, it's 1,000 times return on your investment. That's cool. right? Like there are a lot of professional investors that are okay with that. But when it's like a bad gamble, right? Like your best case scenario is like a break even, your worst case scenario is to lose millions of dollars on top of it, then you got to just be okay with that because there's risk in every venture at a big level,
Right.
especially in the
Yeah.
early stages.
There's nuance, I guess, to what to the gamble that you can take, and especially if people are on board with it and they're like, see how it plays out, like roll the dice one more time. Yeah, I get that. Um,
And look, over the years, you build a rapport with your investors and you build a trust, right? So if you and I work together for 4 or 5 years, my hope would be in 4 or 5 years, you would realize, you can put a lot of weight into what I say and I can put a lot of weight into what you say. And that, you know, that lends a lot of credibility, but it comes with a lot of responsibility on the other side where, in order to you're so much better off to take a short-term loss, but in the long run, maintain integrity.